Donald Trump's photo op yesterday where they brutalized a bunch of people so that he could pretend to be a Christian, that is embarrassing. What's theoretically more embarrassing is the lining up of the bootlickers to pretend that it wasn't what it was, and that it was, in fact, brave and strong and alpha of him to have done that. So Marco Rubio says, many in the media fell for the calculated and deliberate tactics of professional agitators. They knew the street needed to be cleared before 7 p.m. curfew, but they deliberately stayed to trigger police action and get the story they wanted that, quote, police attacked peaceful protesters. So that's not true. That's nonsense. But even if it wasn't nonsense, you're saying that because they were doing a little tactic, they're worse than the people who are throwing flashbangs and tear gas and running horses through them and all of that. That's Marco Rubio, a guy who briefly stuck his head up to pretend that he was going to stand against Donald Trump on the debate stage years ago. And now look at what he is forced to defend.
Little Marco, little brain, little man, little in every capacity. Only little, small people stand up for people, for authorities that have infinitely more power than just regular citizens who are unarmed. That means that you're small. That means that you're not brave enough to actually look at the facts on the ground and stand up for citizens, which is, I think, what you're elected to do, by the way. And it's easier, it's more comforting to side with the favorite than going with the underdog. It's the evil empire. Cool, Marco Rubio. Just goes to show that, as Trump aptly said, you're little, but not just in your stature. You're little as a person.
Yeah. Well, you're right. He is not brave, but we do know one person who is. We have been informed of such by Scott Walker, who said, hard to imagine any other POTUS having the guts to walk out of the White House like this. What?
Like what?
The F.
I hate that black and white photo too.
Yeah, the black and white.
It's like the Entourage. It's like the Entourage cover, except it's just even more douchey, which I didn't think was possible.
So they sent in hundreds of military police to clear everyone out of the region, so that no one is nearby, no one's within earshot. And then he comes clomping out of the White House. What is brave about that? Seriously, Scott Walker, what is brave about that? And if you think that's brave, are you scared to stand near an open window? Are you scared of what are you scared of that this looks like bravery to a tiny little wussy boy like you? Seriously. It's not bravery to brutalize people, to have other people brutalize people, and then for you to, like, walk out in their stead. That's not brave in any way.
You know how in A Song of Ice and Fire and the Game of Thrones book series, they're always talking about how Tyrion has to waddle and his short legs are, like, stunted and awkward? That's how I'm picturing Donald Trump right now in prose.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, like, where's the thing? Okay, so my former co-host of True North referred to Trump as a scaredy puss online. She's from the UK, and I think that is absolutely perfect. Because Donald Trump, of course, would go out and meet with the protesters. He's too scared of that. He cleared them out before he even spoke far away. That's how scared he is. But he's not just scared of everything going on around him. That's why, after all, he was in the bunker. So he's that form of scared, but he's also terrified of what people think, which is why this was reported. CNN reported that Trump was upset about media coverage portraying him as having hidden in a bunker during protests on Friday. His walk to the church was apparently meant to combat that narrative. So he's also terrified of looking weak. Not terrified enough to stop being weak, but terrified enough to attack people to pretend that he's not. Knowing that the layers of bootlickers around him will pretend that he's brave. That he's a brave boy who walked outside to a church and stood holding a Bible like he'd literally never clutched a book before in his life.
And he probably hadn't, John.
He probably hasn't. And it's not just Rubio and and Walker. They're Republican politicians. It's also state media. So as Trump walked through the recently tear-gassed Lafayette Park, Fox anchor Martha McCallum compared him to President Abraham Lincoln, remarking that Trump was, quote, retaking this territory. Again, retaking it from women playing guitars. McCollum reiterated this point shortly thereafter, saying Trump sent the message that he was taking back this real estate, this territory. Karl Rove, who's advising Trump but doesn't say it when he's on Fox, he pretends that he's independent, insists that Trump's photo op was indicative of him seeking to restore a sense of calm, of peace, of normality to the cities. A message slightly undercut by the use of chemical weapons to get there. And Fox News reporter Kevin Corke referred to the protesters as being ushered out of the park. We've all been to a theater. You've been ushered out of things before, right? I mean, at AMC, they don't often use flashbangs, but they don't rule it out for particular film franchises.
Abraham Lincoln is a weird choice, perhaps because Abraham Lincoln very reluctantly, but in order to give the United States some semblance of justice, presided over the Civil War there, basically, and he was, it tore him up that the country was so divided. But the reason the country was divided was so that justice could be served to Black people, and Donald Trump is actively trying to make sure justice is not served to Black people. So there's one person who desperately wanted to unite the country in Abraham Lincoln. Again, did not like the war, was not someone who was a warmonger when you look at history. And then Trump himself, who wants to keep it as divisive as possible because that's how he riles up his base.
Yeah. And so finally, we had some politicians. We have Fox News. I guess we can't be too surprised about that. We shouldn't be surprised about this either. I have a feeling, tune in later on today on the Young Turks when Anna Kasparian will almost certainly be raging against this, and justifiably so. Everything that we just described for you about Donald Trump's speech, how scary and unprecedented and obviously illegal and unconstitutional it was, the ridiculous photo op after, gassing people, including priests, all of that. How does the paper of record describe that night? As chaos spreads, Trump vows to end it now.
I don't get it. I don't get it. He already hates you. Just stop. You're never going to be in Republicans' good graces because they are anti-fact. So maybe just report the facts. It's the most frustrating compulsion.
Yeah.
And I've seen it just talking to people who work in the mainstream media. It's like they're brainwashed in that sense, where they have to be what they think is fair, but it's really just this internalized fear of the right that forces them to portray things as they aren't. And just stop it. Just stop. The country's on fire, and stop claiming that it isn't. Stop claiming that Trump's standing there with a hose when he's really standing there with a flamethrower. I almost swore.
You caught it.
So that's really, look, and the reason that it's so frustrating for us is, I think you share this view, John. We need these papers that are just going to report straight facts. I mean, we rely on them. You and I do to analyze the news every day.
Yes.
So in a healthy democracy, there needs to be that kind of objective news outlet that isn't just us, that are, we obviously have a perspective. And so we want them to do better because we need them to do better.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't want to, I'm not one of the people who's like, ooh, if I attack the New York Times, I can get some people to like me on Twitter or something.
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want them to be good. That's what I want. I don't expect that they're going to be pushing for UBI or anything, but I want them to be reliable. That's what I want. I'm not in this for clout. I'm in this for the country to be where it needs to be. That headline, if they sent that draft to Trump and asked him, any changes, sir? He wouldn't make any. That's what he would have put as the headline. That he's standing astride chaos, vowing to restore peace and justice. But can we really be surprised? I'm sure that if you talk to any individual reporter or person who works at the New York Times, other than Barry Weiss, who's probably horny for fascism, but anyway, if you did that, they'd say, well, I don't want Trump to declare martial law, but you know what else they don't want? They don't want riots. Because they care about tranquility. The false sense of peace. Peace that affects them and the sort of people that they talk to. That's what they want. They're willing to go just so far, but once things start to seem threatened for them, then suddenly, well, Donald Trump does say he's going to end these riots. That almost scares me more than all the rest of it. Marco Rubio and Scott Walker and Fox News and all of them, they're going to line up. And look, even we showed you the MSNBC footage where Garrett Hawk was like, no, this is 100% peaceful. And CNN and MSNBC have done some good stuff during this and some bad stuff. That was good. But the New York Times, whose side are you on? It is very clear. It is front page, first headline clear whose side you're on.
And just one quick point about CNN and MSNBC, like, I do appreciate that they've been really tough on Trump, and they deserve credit. But it's so preening, and it's so off-putting to anyone that isn't just purely anti-Trump, which I know a lot of their audience is. They're older people who are horrified by him. I totally get that. I think younger people are horrified by him in a different way that's less focused on decorum, more focused on fascism and policy. And part of why it's hard for me to watch some of that coverage now that I've been home and watching with my family and stuff is that it's non-existent for corporate Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. So it's hard to watch that and hard for that kind of coverage to have legitimacy when it seems like it's only really there to be feeding the beast of anti-Trump hatred for a certain demographic.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.